All right, let's talk about the end of the road for a business, specifically for a limited liability partnership, or LLP. Closing up shop isn't as simple as just locking the door and walking away. There's a whole legal process called dissolution. And today, we're going to break down that final chapter, step by step. Think of this as the essential guide you'll need to understand how to wind things down the right way.
So here's what we're covering. First, we'll dive into the ledgers. Then we'll talk about who gets to peek at those books. After that, we'll track the cash, look at a pretty wild rewind button for dissolution, and finally, wrap up with timelines and filings. Let's get into it.
Okay, Section 1, opening the ledgers. So before a single penny can be paid out, the liquidator's first job is to get the facts straight. We're talking about one thing, figuring out who the LLP owes money to and how you prove it.
Yeah, think about it. If an LLP is going under, what's the very first question that pops into your head? It's pretty simple, right? Who gets paid? Seriously, this one question is the engine that drives the entire process. Everything starts here.
Well, to figure that out, the law, specifically Rule 50, casts this massive net. It's not just about the bills that are due today. Nope, we're talking about everything. Present debts, future debts, even contingent debts, the what-if kind of claims. The whole point is to make sure every single possible IOU is accounted for right from the get-go.
Okay, so how do you actually prove any of this? The law points to one place, the LLP's own books. Rule 53 says these records are prima facie evidence. Now that's just a fancy legal way of saying they're taken as the truth unless someone proves otherwise. So, in a way, the company's own ledgers are the star witness in this whole process. All right, so the books are the official story, which naturally leads to the next question, who gets to read that story? And that brings us to Section 2, access and accountability. So who gets a backstage pass to see the books? Well, Rule 54 lays it out. Creditors and partners can get a look. But the government, they get a VIP all-access pass. No questions asked, no conditions. They can see whatever they want. And what happens to all this paperwork when the dust settles? Well, it really depends on how the LLP was shut down. If a court, the tribunal, ordered it, then the tribunal calls the shots on what happens to the records. But if it was a voluntary shutdown, the decision goes to the partners. They need a big majority, 3/4, plus a thumbs up from any secured creditors.
But this responsibility doesn't last forever. There's a magic number here, 5 years. After 5 years post-dissolution, the liquidator is officially off the hook. Their duty to keep those records safe is done.
Okay, let's get to the part everyone really cares about, the money. This is huge. When an LLP is being wound up, there are super strict rules for how the cash is handled, and for good reason.
The liquidator has a very clear set of financial duties, and it's all about transparency. Step 1, all the LLP's money has to go into a public account. Step 2, and this is a big one, you can never, ever mix LLP funds with a private account. That's a huge no-no. Step 3, you can't just sit on a pile of cash. And finally, you got to file all your reports on time. It's all about keeping things above board.
And about that cash limit, here's the number to remember, 50,000 rupees. A liquidator can't hold more than that for over 10 days without getting special permission from the tribunal. It just goes to show how tightly the process controls the money.
All right, now for something really interesting, kind of like a plot twist in a movie. What if the end isn't really the end? We're about to talk about the dissolution rewind button.
Yeah, you heard that right. So that begs the question, right? Is dissolution final? Like once it's done, is it really done for good? You'd probably think so, but it turns out there's a fascinating legal loophole.
Here's how this rewind button works. Rule 64 gives the tribunal the power to basically say, you know what, never mind. Within 2 years of the dissolution, someone, like the liquidator, can ask to have it declared void. If the tribunal agrees, boom, it's like the LLP was never dissolved at all. It's a massive safety net, especially if, say, some kind of fraud comes to light later on.
But once that order is made, you've got to move fast. There's a strict 30-day deadline to file that order with the registrar. You miss that window, and it's a problem. This is the step that makes the reversal official and puts the LLP back in business, legally speaking.
Okay, we're in the home stretch now. Section 5, stopping the clock and final filings. This is all about the nitty-gritty admin stuff, timelines, fees, but trust me, it's just as important as everything else.
Now this is a pretty clever rule.
You know how there are time limits, a statute of limitations for filing lawsuits? Well, Rule 66 basically hits the pause button on that clock for the LLP. I mean, it wouldn't be fair for the LLP to lose its right to sue someone just because it's tied up in its own dissolution process, right? So the law freezes time for them.
So how does this pause button actually work? It's pretty specific. The clock stops the moment the winding up process begins. Then that entire chunk of time, from the start of the process all the way to 1 year after the official order, doesn't count. It's just excluded. Then, after that period is over, the clock starts ticking again, right from where it left off.
And last but not least, let's talk about fees. The rule is simple. You file electronically, you pay a fee. But there are a couple of get-out-of-jail-free cards. The government might waive the fee if the dissolution was ordered by the tribunal. And, maybe most importantly, if the LLP is flat broke and the liquidator can certify there are no funds, then no fee is required. That just makes sense. So, when you put it all together, what's the big takeaway? Dissolving an LLP is so much more than just putting a close sign on the door. It's a really detailed, rule-heavy process, and it's all designed to make sure every last obligation is met and everything is handled by the book. Let's take a look at how it's done.
And that's the big question, isn't it? A company is a legal entity, almost like a person in the eyes of the law. So you can't just make it, poof, vanish into thin air. It has to be taken apart, piece by piece, following a very specific rulebook. It really is like a maze, but it's not meant to trap you. It's more of a planned journey, a path from point A to point B. And the good news is, if you have the right map, it's totally navigable. So let's take a look at our map and start with the first turn. Okay, so our map has 4 main sections. We're going to start with what I call the paperwork gauntlet. Then we'll cover spreading the word, followed by a look inside the tribunal. And we'll wrap it all up with the big why all this procedure actually matters.
All right, first stop, the paperwork. Before a single argument is heard, before any decisions are made, you have to create a perfect, precise paper trail. This is the foundation for the entire process, and if you get it wrong, the whole thing can fall apart.
It all kicks off with 3 key actions. First, you draft the petition, which is the formal written request. Second, you verify everything in it with an affidavit. That's a sworn statement where you basically say, yep, everything in here is true. And third, you file it with the tribunal. That's the step that officially gets the ball rolling.
And when they say the devil's in the details, they are not kidding. The rules get incredibly specific. We're talking about the exact size of the paper, the fact that the pages have to be physically stitched together, even how every single paragraph is numbered. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it, all to create a perfect, unchangeable record. They even give each petition its own unique serial number, locking it into the system. This really tells you everything you need to know about the legal mindset. Procedure comes first. If that foundation isn't perfect, the whole structure is at risk. So once that foundation is set, what's next? Well, now it's time to start talking. And that brings us to phase 2, which is all about communication. See, the legal system is designed to avoid surprises. The whole idea is to make sure that absolutely everyone who has a stake in the business knows what's going on. This happens in 2 main ways. You've got your public notice, which is basically an advertisement in both an English and a regional language newspaper. This is to catch any unknown stakeholders out there. But then you have the personal notice. This is a direct summons served right to the company and other key individuals so that no one can ever say, I didn't know. And timing is absolutely critical here. As you can see, the law is strict. Both the newspaper ad and the personal notice have to be out there at least 7 days before the hearing. And that's not some arbitrary number. It's designed to give everyone a fair amount of time to prepare and respond. So who does all this work? It's all on the petitioner. The person who started this whole process is responsible for serving every notice and publishing every ad. And get this, they even have to file another sworn affidavit just to prove they did it all correctly. It is a system built entirely on accountability. Okay, so the paperwork is in, the notices are out, and now the action moves inside the tribunal. This is where the case is actually heard, and you better believe it, it has its own very strict set of rules. This quote right here is the guiding principle. It basically gives the tribunal the ultimate power to do whatever is necessary to get a just outcome and to stop anyone from abusing the system. It's like their mission statement, ensure fairness, period. And inside that courtroom, the rules of engagement are crystal clear. You want to delay the hearing? It's going to cost you. Is the argument getting a little murky? The tribunal can order more written evidence to clarify things. And at the end of the day, the official in charge can either make a final ruling or map out what happens next. And behind the scenes, everything, and I mean everything, is being documented. The tribunal keeps these super specific official registers for every single type of action, from who filed the petition to who even showed up at the hearing. It creates this exhaustive official record of the entire legal journey.
So ultimately, you can think of the tribunal as the referee. Its job isn't just to hear arguments, it's to manage the entire process, making sure it's fair, it's orderly, and that it leads to a final, legally binding conclusion for everyone.
So, we've walked through this whole complex maze of paperwork and notices and hearings, which brings us to the really big question. Why? Why all these complicated rules?
It's really easy to look at all this and just write it off as bureaucracy or red tape, but it's not. There's actually a deep and really important logic behind every single one of these rules.
See, each rule has a job to do. Those newspaper ads, they create transparency. The personal notices, they guarantee fairness. The step-by-step rules provide order. The tribunal's power ensures justice. And all of it, working together, is designed to provide one crucial thing: finality. A clean, legal end to the business, so everyone involved can finally move on.
If you're tackling business law, you know just how tricky dissolving a limited liability partnership can be. So today, we are going to draw a crystal clear roadmap for one of the most critical parts of that journey, the petition to wind up an LLP. Here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to follow this petition through 5 key stages. We'll kick things off with the initial filing, watch it move through the tribunal, and see how the opposition gets its turn. Then we'll dive into appointing a liquidator before we finally land at the end of the road, the final winding up order. All right, let's jump into Section 1, initiating the winding up. Every single legal process has to start somewhere. For an LLP, that starting line is a formal petition. So what even is a petition for winding up? Well, think of it as the official application you send to the tribunal. But it's way more than just a simple request. This is the specific, formal legal document that presses the big red button and kicks off the entire dissolution process. Now, getting this initial filing right is absolutely critical. You have to be precise. You've got to use the correct form, file 2 copies of everything, and this is a big one. If the LLP is the one starting this process, it must attach a full statement of affairs. This makes sure the tribunal has a totally clear and accurate financial snapshot right from the get-go. On to Section 2, navigating the tribunal. So once that petition is filed, it's out of the partner's hands. It's now officially in the legal system. Let's trace its path all the way from the filing cabinet to its very first hearing. The petition's journey begins the moment the registrar stamps the presentation date on it. From there, it goes to a tribunal member who reviews it privately, what they call in chambers, to decide if it should even be admitted. If it gets the green light, a hearing date is set, and the tribunal might order the LLP to be notified before the whole thing is formally advertised. What's really fascinating here is the balance between transparency and control. See, on one hand, partners and creditors can get their hands on a copy of the petition super fast. But on the other hand, the process is locked down tight. Once it's filed, you can't just withdraw the petition without permission. The tribunal is in complete control. It can even swap in a new petitioner if the original one decides to back out. This is all to stop people from abusing the process. And now, for Section 3, responding to the petition. Look, filing a petition is really just the opening move in a chess game. The process is built to allow for opposition, so let's check out the formal procedure for anyone who wants to challenge the winding up. The timeline for a response is incredibly tight. It's a real race against the clock. Anyone who wants to oppose the petition has to file their argument at least 5 days before the hearing. And then, the petitioner gets this super narrow window, just until 2 days before the hearing, to file their reply. This strict schedule is all about getting the arguments on the table fast and preventing any unnecessary delays. Okay, Section 4, appointing a liquidator. The petition's been admitted, the arguments have been heard, and now we're at a really pivotal moment. The tribunal can step in and appoint a neutral third party to take the reins and control the LLP's affairs. So let's just pause here for a second and ask a question that is absolutely vital for any student to remember. Once the tribunal gives the official thumbs up and admits the petition, what's the very next major step it can take? And the answer is the appointment of a provisional liquidator. This person is basically an officer of the court who steps in to manage the LLP's business while the case is still going on. The appointment order itself, Form 30, is so important because it spells out the exact scope of the liquidator's powers and any limits placed on them. And this right here is a point you have to understand. Who's footing the bill for all of this? Well, the liquidator's fees and all their expenses are not paid by the court or the person who filed the petition. Nope, they are paid directly from the assets of the very LLP that's being wound up. And that brings us to Section 5, the final winding up order. We've made it to the last stop on our roadmap. All the preliminary steps are done, and the process is now heading toward the tribunal's ultimate decision. So the liquidator doesn't just go off and do their own thing. Their first major job is to investigate the LLP's business and then submit a report back to the tribunal. And this isn't just a summary of what they found. It's a formal request for specific directions on what to do next. This makes sure all their actions are approved by the court. Right. So, based on that report from the liquidator, the tribunal then issues its directions. And these aren't just vague suggestions. We're talking about specific, concrete instructions that can cover everything from how to manage assets to setting hard deadlines for getting certain tasks done. And then, finally, if the tribunal decides to go ahead with the dissolution, it issues the official winding up order. This is the final word, and it's all documented in a specific legal document called Form 33. But wait, the process doesn't just stop with a signature on a form. The very last step is to make it all public. The tribunal gives exact directions on how this final order has to be advertised and which parties need to be formally notified, ensuring total transparency for everyone involved.